to 16 in the 6. I'm your host, Jeff Barrett with Business Interiors. Thank you for joining us today. The purpose of this interview series is for the close-knit Toronto commercial real estate industry to share ideas and best practices in order to help everyone get back to the office safely and efficiently. Joining us today is Matt Tedesco, Vice President and General Manager, Greater New York and Canada with Herman Miller. Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Welcome, Jeff. Thanks. Good to see you, man.
Can you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I've been in the business for 17 years. I am based about 30 kilometers west of Manhattan. Been with Herman Miller cumulatively for 11 of those years. Also worked at Knoll, worked at Hayworth. I ran 5 countries for Hayworth in Asia. So that was kind of fun. I was based in Shanghai. Been back in Miller ever since 2017, and fortunately joined the Canadian team back in August of this year. Now, I'm part of that. So that's how I ultimately landed here, dude.
Personally, how are you managing?
Honestly, I'm built for pandemic, to be honest, Jeff. One is I had a single mom growing up, and she was all about resiliency and just always about, no drama, focus on what you can control, your attitude, your work ethic. So from that perspective, feel pretty good. I have a great home setup. I'm very fortunate to have space. I'm in my studio here, my office. It's very comfortable, and I'm pretty disciplined around the way I get to work. And I'm lucky to have 2 really great teams in the New York, New Jersey area and in Canada who are hyper-focused, very, very competent. We've still been winning a lot of business. So from that perspective, it's really good. And we're healthy. So I really can't complain. Net in pretty good spot.
So Matt, in a new segment on the show, we take a deep dive on our guests' LinkedIn accounts and look for posts that need more context.
Cool.
So 10 months ago, you posted, I'm truly grateful to work for an amazing group of people every day that bring me so much authentic joy. We laugh together, we have each other's backs, lift each other up, and celebrate our successes as well as our differences. This Harvard research reminded me of how lucky I am and how important joy is for the human condition. I hope you find as much joy in your work as I do. If not, here are 9 tips to help, which is an article, 9 ways to feel more joy at work, according to Harvard. Oh, I love this post, Matt. I love the positivity in this post. What can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I would say one of my leadership pillars, I have sort of 3. One of it is casual intensity, and I borrow that from a company called Regeneron out in the West Coast for the US. For me, casual intensity means one is I'm hyper competitive. I love to win, but I also believe in levity. I believe in humor. I believe in joy and bringing that more into work, more playfulness into work. And the human condition is one of wanting to be joyful and celebrate each other, celebrate small wins, big wins. We obviously do much better work if we're in a condition that we feel supported and that we can celebrate. And so for me as a leader, my thinking is not drive people to a number, but how do I create opportunities for people to find success in their day, find joy in their day? And I do think Herman Miller believes in that pathos as well. And it's important for us to tap into that. And especially if you think about the last year, this has been a year where if you had no joy at your work in general, and you layer on top of that working in these extreme conditions for such a prolonged time with so much ambiguity and stress, that could become a mountain to overcome. But if you had this foundation, a place where you thoroughly enjoyed the people you work with, felt like you could be yourself, felt like you could laugh, make mistakes, there was a sense of progress and a sense of pride of what you did, you could kind of get through it, right? There's still gonna be tough days, but at the end of it, you could muscle your way through. And in fact, I think that's what's happened.
I'm looking at your setup there, Matt. Is there a wall of speakers just off to the side of the camera that I can't see? I see
the speakers are right here. There are 2 large monitors, which is for recording. They give you direct feedback there, which I almost never have on because they can get very loud. So I have everything in headphones. But when you write and produce music, you're repeating the same thing many, 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 many times over and over again. And so my family would become pretty annoyed at the fact that they've heard this one beat over and over. And sometimes it could be 1,200 times. Also ruins the surprise if they hear that song for the first time. They've already heard it so many times and sound as good. But no, otherwise it's a fairly I'll show you real quick. There's some more guitars there. Beautiful little Magus puppy there, designed by Gensler. That's kind of fun. And then I got my keyboard there and other guitars and some more stuff. So this holiday season will probably find me with a few more musical toys to play with as well.
Is there a SoundCloud link that we could send to the viewers?
There is SoundCloud, there's Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon. If you'd like to, look, I'm not a musician. I'm just a dude who's got nothing to do on the weekends and owns some guitars. But my band name or artist name, if you will, is NJMJ, as in like New Jersey, Matthew John, NJMJ. So you could search any of the normal platforms and find that there.
Can you tell me about your book of business and how it's been affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, I think if you look at the New York, New Jersey market, we were kind of the first to be hit by COVID in a real significant way in the US. And that impact was deep. I mean, the cut was deep. I think there's a psychological impact for people having to get on public transportation, go back to work. And so the opportunity to sort of get back into the office will be longer. I think there's a longer tail in New York than it might be in other parts of the US. So there it's fairly significant. And the good news is that we did have some significant wins earlier in the year. We have a team that's very, very, very well equipped to handle this type of thing. And so we've been able to sustain ourselves and stay pretty busy and stay pretty positive, but it's significant and it probably will be that way for a little while. So I believe New York is very unique and will ultimately rebound. And so long-term, I think we'll be in a great position, but it's certainly has had some challenges. In Canada, as you know, there's also some markets that have been more hit than others. And in general, I think the Canadian government has done a better job of mitigating the bigger impact of the COVID, meaning like the life and death piece of it. But certainly there's been a slowdown from a business perspective. The opportunities for Toronto is that there's more chance for companies to be moving into space than ever, right? There's increase in vacancy, which means maybe people actually can find space and move in. There might be actually a deal or two out there. So that could present opportunities for us. Certainly the other markets around the country are still doing pretty well, and other markets are still, somewhat struggling, but net in Canada is that the business is still fairly strong. And it looks like we'll probably hit our goals this year in Canada, which is great. Both East and Western Canada doing pretty strong for Herman Miller. So overall, really can't complain. I think the organization, Herman Miller, realized pretty well where we were heading and made some pretty good adjustments from a forecasting perspective, a resource allocation perspective. So we're in a pretty good spot to continue to grow and be successful.
So Matt, for the product review section, what I was doing at the beginning of COVID was finding COVID relevant products or solutions to talk about. I've run out of products or solutions to talk about that are interesting. So I've taken this opportunity to turn it over to the guests, let them present something they're working on, a new product, a new case study that they want to get out there. So Matt, the floor is yours. I'm really excited to hear what you have to present to us.
Cool. Well, let me kick this off. I think when I was thinking about this, to me, it was, I didn't want to share a furniture product. I think we certainly could. I could spend an hour talking about our seating or something cool from that perspective, but it was along the similar lines around the importance of data. And I can't tell you how many conversations I had with customers who just didn't have meaningful data. And when they were going into this, it was like they really still weren't sure how many people would I have to bring back. Who was even really coming to the office from a department perspective? What was the type of work they were doing? How often? Where were they positioned? Were they coming in the office and going to a meeting room, or were they going to their desk? Were they using the soft seating area? They literally couldn't. They didn't know. So it was very hard for them to make these pivots and these decisions. So what I wanted to share today was around what we call a live platform. You can see us, okay? This is our landing page. You could easily go and find us on hermiller.com and go into the search tool and put live platform. But what's so compelling about live platform, if you think about it, is every company today, small or large, has an absolute ton of raw material. They have a whole bunch of unrefined raw oil, right? By the way, I steal this metaphor from a Canadian, Paulo, who used to run the market, and just a great example to me of his genius. But so I want to give him credit, because if I didn't give him, he would hunt me down and make sure that I did this. But the idea is these companies have this oil, but they don't need the oil. That's not what they want. What they really want is jet fuel. That's the fuel that they need to take them into the direction and take them into the place that they ultimately want to get to. So a lot of companies offer devices to harvest the oil. They can extract the oil, right? And that oil is effectively the data, right? So they can tell you how many people walk into the building. They could tell me how many cards get swiped. But they don't really know what people are doing in the space. They don't know specifics of how the space is being used. And they certainly can't talk to the individual in the space and make improvements there. I remember one funny example. I was in Asia at the time, and I talked to somebody, a very big multinational company, and they were very proud that they had like 75% of the people swiped into their gym once a month. And for them, that was this great metric around health and well-being. And we asked, do you know what they do when they get to the gym? They had no idea. So if you just swiped into the gym, now it's a health and well-being statistic for this company. We couldn't tell. I always thought that was kind of interesting. But so on this level, it's, again, so many customers were frustrated with the fact that I don't know who do I tell to come back first? Well, who do I say, hey, it's okay to stop? Because it turns out only 30% of you are coming in anyway, so don't worry about it. Or when I go to redesign my space, do I have to create 10 more pods for individual learning, or do I create 20 more spaces where I can have teams of 2 or 4? And so they had the data, but they had no way to really synthesize that data, or they never even collected the data at all, which is an absolute worst case scenario. And Live Platform really looks to solve both those problems, right? In addition, it looks to do a little bit more, and I'll share about that in a second. When we talk about optimizing real estate, we're not talking about squeezing more people into space, right? That's often, unfortunately, the way people have thought about real estate is, what is my cost per square foot and how many people can I get into the space? We're talking about how do you really make the space work for the design purpose of driving productivity and enhancing human performance in that space. And when you really need to know what's going on, and you need syntax and you need ongoing collection of information to really provide meaningful insight. So what we do in addition to that is very unique, and I think very, very relevant to a post-COVID world, is in addition to what we're going to talk about in a second, taking this raw data, we also allow you to look at how do you work with unassigned seating. So in a space really right now where you might move significantly in that direction to a much different than 1-to-1 ratio, how do people know what's available to them? If I'm about to get on a train or hop in my car for an hour, I want to make sure when I get there, my desk is available. So having some ability to enhance that experience is really critical. And the third point that we've all learned out of this COVID is, man, it's really important to take care of ourselves. Well-being is hypercritical, emotional, mental, physical well-being. And so we can actually use this tool, this Live Platform, to promote personal well-being. So we take all this raw material, if you will, and the next step is a refinery. And that's often the part that gets missed. So taking raw material, taking oil and giving it to a customer that they want jet fuel out of is useless. But what we do is we take it to our refinery. Our refinery is called the living office. That is the filter by which we look at all research, all the inputs that we've discovered over the last 60 years, and how we ultimately synthesize that to create really, really meaningful jet fuel for the client. That living office is very, very unique to Herman Miller. Again, as somebody who's worked in this industry for 17 years, I would tell you there's probably only one other company in the world who might be able to offer something that's relatively similar, and then there's a massive drop, and no one else is really even remotely close. And our filters are unique. Our filters come from the background of the organization who founded Cradle to Cradle. The organization who founded USGBC, which is effectively what you guys would think of the organization that supports Green and now LEED, right? One of the first companies to take on LEED, for example, and well building, right? And well-being. So the well-building standard. Those filters are pretty unique to Herman Miller, and those filters are ultimately what we're driving through Live Platform. And so this is a great video. I'm not going to show it right now, but I would highly suggest you take a look at that video. The idea is effectively Live can go throughout the entire floor plate. We can measure how people are using your private offices, how they're using your conference rooms, how they're using individual workstations, even the collaborative seating, those little zones of couches and chairs set up, et cetera. We can tell you live any time of the day, any moment of the year, exactly how they're being utilized. And so as we can connect syntax to that too, we can start to say, hey, you know what, as we put this through our refinery, it turns out that rooms that have low access to light, rooms or spaces that have very low visibility to other human beings, for example, may be very underutilized. Spaces that have high noise elements may not unsurprisingly be underutilized as well, right? So how we can change those dynamics? What does that look like? And then we can help provide you with solutions, work alongside your other partners in the design community to work through what future iterations could be like. So that you're not worrying 3 years, so 5 years to hear, hey, I made this investment in these 2 conference rooms. They held 30 people and 2 people are them all the time. Well, that doesn't do anybody any good. We could find that information out pretty rapidly. And how do we design the space? Well, to begin with, we maybe can adapt that space pretty quickly to redirect the way it's being used. If you could imagine also in this scenario, you would have pretty clear information in terms of who was using what spaces, how often they were being used, probably have some syntax in terms of why they were being used. And if you need to recreate that space, or those spaces in, let's say, other parts of your floor plate, other parts of your building, or maybe even into suburban hub and spoke type models that you're about to create, you'd have information that you could then go out and replicate. What additionally makes Live Platform pretty unique is that it is subscription based. So you basically, it's pay to play, right? How much you need is how much you're going to have to pay for, and how much you want to expand and use it, ultimately where the cost will be. And the cost is very, very, very minimal. You do get a really intuitive dashboard day one. So you can, if I'm managing all of Canada from New York, I literally could dial in right now on a web link and see all my sites. I could see exactly how things are being used, right? So again, very useful in a COVID world, because you could easily check in and say, hey, I thought the place was supposed to be at 25%. Why am I seeing 80% utilization in my conference room right now? From a security perspective, I'm not comfortable with that. You can make some adjustments. On the flip side, if somebody says, we need people back in the office, and you can say, well, historically, you never had more than 25%. I think we're okay at the current measurements that we have, or the current protocol we have. That's data allows you to have those types of conversations. You get, depending on how often you want it, you can get reports in a certain type of cadence. Of course, with those reports come a team of people to support you with what those reports actually mean, so you can actually drive real performance improvements from them. And all this is completely secure. So we've worked with some of the toughest and biggest financial companies in the world who have approved this. The information travels through a very secure network, doesn't interfere with your existing infrastructure. So obviously a lot more information can be provided from that perspective, but it's a really, really good way for us to go into really complex situations and simply add in a level of support. What's really nice about this too, is we talked about this around this, the idea of the individual employee could opt in to say, hey, you know what, I really want to know if I'm using my high decibel table well enough, right? So I can, if I'm assigned to a desk, or if I'm going to go into any desk that has the right hookup for a Live Platform, I can literally have that desk tell me when to stand up. If I pre-programmed, I want to be standing for 30 minutes of an hour, or 3 times a day, or 10 times a day, I want to make transitions at that desk could literally talk to my phone, and it can communicate, and it can give me sort of reminders around that. And you can set things around your posture preference, around the sort of all your general metrics as well, and your sort of some of the goals you're trying to set from a performance standpoint. And that's all baked into Live Platform. That's an add-on, not required, but an add-on. And so the workplace consultant piece we talked about, that's part of that process as well. And that's really that refinery to ultimately take that raw material oil and get you that jet fuel. So here's a little bit around, you can see the pricing, very, very, very mild pricing from from a total cost of ownership perspective, very, very minimal. And we're literally talking about pennies on the dollar compared to what you're spending overall for furniture. Obviously, you could spend a lot more time diving into this, but Jeff, I thought it was pretty important, pretty relevant in terms of where the state of the world is from a furniture perspective, and how we're trying to look at data in a way to drive better decision-making.
Thanks, Matt. That's awesome. First, I'll point out that is American pricing. You will need to go to the website.
Thank you. That's right.
I obviously very familiar with this program and promote it often. I love it for a lot of reasons. The first one, COVID aside, we're constantly getting clients experimenting, right? We experiment with new settings. We see the Google office, and how many clients do we have coming to us saying, give us the Google,
That's right.
And that's where we say, you're an accounting firm, you're not Google, let's take a step back and maybe understand you a little bit. But, we're constantly seeing these really cool spaces come out of the design firms. And sometimes we know the data that has gone into that decision, and sometimes we don't. But a lot of times it's very experimental. It's very, we see these around, everyone else is doing it, let's give it a try. But people don't know how to measure the success of that new setting, right? Like 2 years down the road, is anyone sitting there? How do we know that? Either you walk around with a clipboard and every time someone sits in there, we make a note, obviously incredibly inefficient, and it's not going to get the data you're looking for. So it's a great way to measure the success of the design post-design, because no design is perfect. No design firm will tell you that it is perfect. And we need to find those inefficiencies. And this is a great tool for that. Post-COVID, yeah, we already said it. The data collection of facilitating the re-entry into the space is going to be so critical. Without technology to help facilitate that, we're going to get some poor soul in the office whose job is going to be to, John sat here, Susie sat here, make sure they clean this and clean that. Where a program like this will facilitate all of that very easily. And the last piece, you kind of skimmed over it, but I actually think it's a big part of it, is the height adjustable table advice that it provides. Not all companies need space utilization data. If you're a smaller organization, it's not going to be as valuable. But the reality is when people invest in height adjustable tables, the actual utilization of those tables is usually below 50%. And so it can be a poor investment for an organization. And so by investing in this tool that teaches people how to use the tools that you've invested in, and then provides that kind of slow drip of information to them about their usage over time, you will prove usage will increase in making just your investment that much more worthwhile. So, that's not really a question, but complimenting what you said, because I'm really passionate about this tool. But what kind of engagement are you seeing with clients in this tool right now?
Oh, definitely increased. I would say even before COVID, it was definitely part of most of our big conversations with large clients. Now it's part of every conversation. A lot of clients were stung by having no information. And almost every client I know has gone through some sort of reconfigure, or what does new space look like? And to have the data to say, yeah, you know what, these spaces were incredibly important and really well utilized, and we definitely want them, we love those, and we have to do more of those. They just don't have that information. So a lot of times there's a lot of guesswork that goes in. And most clients are not, what they do is they hire a design firm months before they do some sort of planning or move, and they do kind of the bed check. And they come in with a board. That board naturally changes behavior. People know when people are coming in, and they just behave, whatever the case may be. But to have the ability real time, all the time, to make those pivots and changes, it's hypercritical in this world. And it's inevitable that there'll be another black swan event, and we'll have to pivot again. And so you want to be prepared for it. So the good news is a lot more clients are looking at it. It really is a fraction of the cost. I mean, we're talking about a very small amount of money. Even when you do it entire enterprise wide, it's not that much. And if you think about what you gain out of it, typically what happens that customers have used in the past have realized that they could actually probably use a little less real estate. So the net gain on just taking off a small percentage points in terms of overall real estate portfolio easily covers the part for live platform. And again, the power on what's really hard to calculate is when you make a bad decision. So it's hard to understand all the opportunity cost and the fact that you've spent money on places that won't be utilized at all. I think one of the most interesting conversations we're having is, okay, if we know some places are not going to work, how do I build in a program with my deal with Herman Miller so that I can make changes to those spaces? Can I come up with a service package that says, okay, some of this stuff I can take some of it back, or I could redeploy it someplace, other assets. A lot of times it's not about the furniture per se, it's about the application. It's about some sort of other variable in the space, heat, noise, acoustics, whatever the cases may be, right? Access to light, privacy, those types of things. Can you make those types of changes fairly quick and get a lot more of your asset? And the third piece I'd say, or the last piece I'd say that adds to what you just talked about is you make this investment, and oftentimes what happens is you've chosen Herman Miller. You've literally chosen the best furniture in the world. So the people come in and they kind of take for granted. Now they show up, they've got a cool table, a nice desk, great looking space. They don't really know what you put into it. And so we need to do a better job of sharing that, of you as a client getting credibility for that. And one way that app helps you do that, because right away the app is very much about the individual end user. It's about their well-being and their health. So they know, wow, okay, they made an investment, because everyone I talk to doesn't have a desk like this. The desk that literally talks to me and helps me sit better, have better posture, and feel better at the end of the day. The net of that is also the customer gets a way better, more engaged employee. So it's a win across the board. And I think a lot more customers are talking about how do we provide these spaces that our employees really want to come to. Having ones that are healthy for them is definitely a key way of doing that.
I'll tell you a little story. I worked for an interior design firm once, very progressive firm north of the city in Toronto. And they offered a post-project kind of checkpoint, right? 6 months, a year down the road, we'll come back in, talk to some people, maybe issue a survey, do some space utilization studies, but the clients never took them up on it. It was included as part of the package. It was like a value add that people didn't take them up on, because once you get through a project, you're exhausted. And sometimes you don't want to do that. You don't want to engage your employees to ask their opinion, because you've got all of their data for years leading up to the project. So what I love about this is this just happens in the background, right? You don't need to have a big engagement and engage employees and disrupt people. It's just happening. As soon as you moved in, it's the day one, it's collecting that information for you to work with long term.
That's exactly right.
Matt, is there anything else you want the Six to know about you or Herman Miller and how you're joining the fight against COVID-19?
Well, look, first I'd say thanks again, Jeff, for the time. I think the final comment would be Herman Miller is spending an enormous amount of energy and focus on making sure that we create and help our clients create unbelievable spaces for the future. And I don't think COVID's really changed that. It certainly made us think about certain things differently, but we're still committed more than ever, actually, of believing that spaces are an important part, strategic part of an organization's path forward and the humans experience in space, and making sure they feel really good and compelling and can do their best work and heal and learn and live and really love what they do. So I think you expect to see a lot more from Herman Miller. I think we've already done quite a bit over the past 9 months, but I've never seen the organization more motivated to do great work and to be committed to the communities that we serve. So I'm very excited, happy to be part of the Canadian team, super grateful to be part of Herman Miller, what we're doing, and can't wait to see the podcast, Jeff. I'm looking forward to how you bring this all together.
Well, thank you, Matt, for sharing how you and Herman Miller are joining the fight against COVID-19. Keep up the good work. Toronto, you are the best city in the world. We can't wait for you to feel better. Oh yeah, and I forgot to say, if you find me taking an awkward pause sometimes, it's because I'm trying to create some room to edit, right? So if I'm like just staring at you for a couple extra seconds, it's just because I'm just clearing some space there.
I'm used to that. People often are staring at me for an extra few seconds. Like, what is going on with this dude?